Hi, everybody. Maybe you're watching this the night before, getting ahead of the game, or you're watching this the morning of, on January 6th, before your test. This is your statistics test review. This is going to be a really good practice test and kind of see where you are with some of the key expectations of this unit. And remember, there's not really a lot of things to do, or a lot of things to remember. So hopefully you're okay with this. If not, you still have lots of time to practice, get ready, and don't forget, your test is essentially open book. So you do have a resource there for you. But with that being said, we're going to get into it. So our first example, and one thing I do want to point out, I'm just going to write it here at the top. Even though it's not on this review, make sure that you review the definitions. So that was from your first kind of activity to do on January the 4th, that review sheet that had the definitions plus the reviews. Again, you have it in front of you as an open book resource, but you probably still want to review them so you don't have to write or go through and read every single one for every single definition question on your test. So here we have some class grades on a test out of 100, and there's a lot of data there. So organization here is key, and first thing we want to do is complete the frequency distribution table. I'm not going to do the whole thing, like the tallies for all of them, but if this was a test question or something very similar to this, to handle this much data and to stay organized, it's a good idea to go one by one and then put the tallies where they go. So for instance, we have a 40. Cross it out. Where's 40? Right there. Then we have a 50. Where's 50? Right there. Then 43. 43, right there. 42, right there. 39, right there. 29, right there. And you would work through the rest of this just like that. So if you want to do that, you can pause it and then come back. I'm just going to cut right to the chase here with the frequency. So you should have got 4 there, then 9, then 11, then 5, then 1, then 2, then 2, then 2. Your total number of tallies should have been 36, and your total frequency should have been 36. And if you just count all those grades in the top chart, you should still get 36. Or, even quicker, it's a 3 by 12 table, 3 times 12, 36. Create a histogram. So we're going to do that on the right. Don't forget to title the graph and label your axes appropriately. One thing that's not on here that I just want to include, why should you use a histogram for this? You should use a histogram because it's continuous data. And how do you know it's continuous? We're talking about grades, and is it possible to get half a grade or half a mark on a test? Yes. So a little reminder, continuous. Remember, you can have parts of things, so you could get a half mark. Otherwise, it would be discrete, and you would use a bar graph, not a histogram. So do not forget, for a histogram, bars touch. So let's give it a title. We'll call this marks. You can call it whatever you want. The y-axis for these is always going to be frequency. And our x-axis is going to be what the actual variable was, which in this case, it was grades. So down here, I'm going to write grades. Then put a scale on. We didn't get any zeros, so I don't have to, I'm going to start 0 here. And I'm not going to write every single number just to make it, I don't want to make it too squished. but we're going to go up to ones because our highest was 11. And I think if we go by ones, we'll have enough room. So I'm just going to write every other number. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, 10, and 12. And then for our grades, you're going to write all those intervals. So this was 0 to 10, 11 to 20, 21 to 30, and so on, all the way across. So all the way at 91 to 100. And then you are going to make your bars, and don't forget, they can touch. So we didn't get anything for 0 to 10. We didn't get anything for 11 to 20. They weren't even on our chart. 21 to 30, we got 4. So 21 to 30, we had 4. And remember for your test, if it's a good idea for communication, color these bars in. And then the next one, we got 9. Remember, your bars can touch. In fact, they have to touch since it's a histogram. And you just keep going like that all the way across. The next one was 11. Make sure when you do this for your test and you submit it, you do it with a ruler, not freehand like I'm doing. And then 5. And then 1. And then 3 2s. So 2. Two, and I guess we'll use yellow, and 2, even though it's hard to see. It does say connect the middle of each bar to create a distribution curve. They're on your definition sheet, but it's part of the curriculum that I cut out for the quadmester for the accelerated timeline. So basically you just have to know the definitions. You don't have to know to do this, but sometimes it helps to draw like a trend line. So if we we can kind of see that. And we want to describe the distribution. So make one kind of concluding sentence. Remember, you can write anything you want about this. You could write most students got between 41 and 50. You could say 71 to 100 had 6 students. Again, as long as what you write matches this graph, you can say anything you want. So maybe for creativity, I'll just write 6 students got a mark, so got 71 to 100. Right, we had 2 in the 71 to 80, 2 in the 81 to 90, and 2 in the 91 to 100. That's 6. Again, you can write whatever you want as long as it matches your graph. And there's our first question out of the way. Our next example. Rachel works as a waitress at a local restaurant. Her monthly earnings from March to August are listed below. We want to do her central tendency, so mean, median, and mode. Those 3 words that start with M. Remember, when you're finding the median, you want to put these in order from lowest to highest, or highest to lowest, doesn't really matter. But we, through the lessons, did lowest to highest. So I'm going to put those in order first before I do anything, so we don't forget. So 1630. 1730, 1780, 1880, 1990, and 2000. So let's start finding her mean. Remember mean, that symbol we use, x bar. Add those all up and divide by how many numbers there are. So you can take a second, take out your calculator, add up those numbers. Hopefully you get $11,010. How many numbers are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Since this is money, you would go to 2 decimal places if applicable. It actually ends up being a nice number, $1,835. And that would be dollars per month. So mean, done. Median, middle value. Start on the outsides and work your way in. You're going to notice that the middle is right there. So now you don't just label this as median. You have to actually figure what the value is. So we want to figure out what's halfway between 1780 and 1880. Remember, to do this, basically you're finding the average of two numbers. So add them together. So this would be, since it's the review, I'll show all the steps. And divide by 2. And when you add those together, you get 3,660 divided by 2. Halfway is 1830. Now you'll know if you've made a mistake because the number has to be in between those two. So if you got like, I don't know, 1900, let's say, as one of your answers, 1900 is clearly not in between 1780 or 1880, so you should know, go back and double check. And the last thing is the mode. Mode, remember, is the number that appears most often. In this case, there's no repeats, so you would just write no mode. Determine the range. That we did with our measures of spread note yesterday. Range is the kind of simplest calculation you can do for how far apart your data are spread, and that's just your highest number, which in this case is 2000. Subtract your lowest number, 1630, and we should get $370. What does the range measure? I just verbally said that. How spread apart the data is. And again, smaller is better here. So smaller the range, smaller the standard deviation, that's better. So 370, is that good, is that bad? It doesn't seem too bad. I mean, for the difference between $2,000 and $1,600. But unless you compare it to somebody else, you don't really know necessarily if it's that good or that bad. So that was the simple calculation for measures of spread. Now we're moving on to the big question. And not big in the sense that, again, it's not doable. You guys definitely can do this. It's just calculations. It's just there's a few steps and there's some potential to make some mistakes, and this type of question is going to be out of a lot of marks. So we have Brittany and Jake. They're salespeople for some company, XYZ. They produce gadgets and widgets. Here's their sale numbers for each year. So each quarter of the year. So there's Brittany's first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter sales, and Jake's as well. So the first thing you want to do, even if I don't tell you to, which I specifically do here, but even if I don't, when you're finding the standard deviation, you need the mean. So for Brittany, x bar equals, add up all of her numbers from 51 through to 75, and you should get 224 divided by how many numbers there are, which is 4. Divide that by 4. Brittany's mean is 56. Jake, again, his X bar, just like an average. Add up all his numbers, 54 across the 74, 220. He's got 4 numbers, 55. So far their means are very, very similar. Brittany has the higher mean, just by 1 though, so they're pretty close. We now want to calculate their standard deviation. So remember, variance comes before standard deviation, and we use these tables. So the first thing you want to do is fill this out. And I gave it to you already with the numbers filled in. If I didn't, like your assignment, let's say, you got to put those numbers in. And then you do what it tells you, x minus the mean, which I can even write x minus x bar there. So I'll do the first couple. So x, which is 51, minus the mean, we just got 56. That equals -5. Then the next column, so there's step 2, there's step 3. The next column, take that number, x minus x bar, and square it. Remember, don't tell me that's -25. Anything squared is always positive. That column on the end should never have any negative values in it. Then we'll do the next one, 40 minus 56, -16, squared is 256. I'm going to stop writing all the steps now. You're more than welcome to pause it and work through and make sure you know what you're doing for this. Again, this is going to be a lot of marks for both your assignment and for your test. So 58 minus 56 is 2, squared is 4, and then the next one, 19 squared is 361. Total, just add them all up. So this would be like your step 4, 646. While we're here with the tables, let's do Jake's. So again, I'm not going to bother writing all the steps here, the subtraction steps. I'm sure you get the idea. One quick thing to note, since we're dealing with 2 people here and they don't have the same mean, don't by accident, so I will do this first one actually, don't by accident write 54 minus 56 because you got 56 on the brain from Brittany. Remember, Jake's mean was 55. So 54 minus 55, -1, squared, +1. Keep using 55, do the subtraction. You should get -25, 625, 7, 49, 19, 361. Add them all up, 1,036. So we're not done. We got to do the variance. So let's do Brittany's. So we'll call this area Brittany's. And I'm just going to I'll write variance. Now I don't have it here for you, but you do have the note from yesterday. Variance is your total divided by how many numbers you have. So for Brittany, her total was 646, 4 numbers. Go to 1 decimal place when you divide, 161.5. And then her standard deviation is the square root of that number, 1 decimal place. You should get 12.7. Remember, those don't have units attached to them. That's just a number. And then for Jake, we'll change the color. His variance total divided by how many numbers? It's 4. It's 259. Standard deviation equals the square root of that number, 1 decimal place, 16.1. Remember, lower is better. So Brittany actually had a little bit higher of a mean, so she was up by 1. However, we can see that she was much more consistent than Jake was. So she had a 12.7 standard deviation, Jake had a 16.1. That just means that, again, standard deviations, how spread apart your data is, how consistent, tells you, the bigger that number is, the more there's an outlier, the more you're inconsistent. So I don't, actually, no, we'll do it. So we'll write maybe Brittany deserves the raise or bonus. Her standard deviation was lower, which means she was more consistent. And since their means were almost essential, that works. Obviously, if there was a question where someone's mean was, let's say Brittany's mean was 56, and since we're talking about sales, the higher the better, and Jake's mean sales were 20, and Jake ended up being more consistent, you wouldn't necessarily say Jake deserves the raise because he was more consistent. Yes, he was more consistent, but he was like consistently worse than Brittany, is kind of what you might want to say. So let's keep that in mind. You want these means to be the same or to be very close when you're comparing that consistency. So again, I can't stress this enough. And then the last question that we're going to do together, how to do this question, both for your assignment. You're going to notice the numbers don't match what was posted on D2L in the content section, just because I've cut out certain questions that we didn't cover. So below we have a frequency distribution table for the amount of time spent on English homework. We want to calculate the percent for each time interval and then draw one conclusion. And I'm actually going to even add another column onto this now that I think about it. And I'm going to add here degrees. So if you were to make a pie chart, which we're not going to, but we did go over the process for how to, and this is also on your assignment. So for the frequency, I've given you all the numbers. We added them up, we got 27. How do you find the percent? Take the number 8, divide by the total, 27, and times 100. Go to one decimal place, use your calculator, 29.6%. And then do the same, we'll do once more, writing all the steps. 2 divided by the total, 27, times 100. One decimal place, 7.4. Try the rest on your own, come back at the answers. 44.4% is the next one, and then 18.5 is the next one. And a quick built-in self-check, remember, all of those numbers basically should be like really, really close to 100, if not 100. So due to rounding, remember you might not get 100 right on, but you should get something like 99, 100, maybe slightly above 100, something in that range. Now for degrees, it's almost the same process. So you still are going to do the frequency divided by the total. But instead of multiplying by 100, you're going to multiply by how many degrees are there in a circle. And hopefully most of you remember there are 360 degrees in a circle. So take out your calculator, 8 divided by 27 times 360. We'll go to one decimal place, 106.7 degrees. And we'll do it again. 2 divided by 27 times 360, 26.7. 12 divided by 27 times 360. This one we get a nice clean number, 160 degrees right on. And then 5 divided by 27 times 360. 66.7 degrees. Add those all up, you should get something really close to 360. So 106.7 plus 26.7 plus 160 plus 66.7. I got 360.1. Really, really close. Due to rounding, we were off by 1/10 of a degree. This question's on your assignment. It's on your test. Make sure to fill out this table. Remember, I'm not going to expect you to make a pie chart since you don't all have protractors, but we still are going to have to go through the process of how you would figure out how many degrees are in each pie slice of a pie chart. And the last part of this, draw one conclusion, meaning write one sentence. Again, as long as it matches the data in the table, you can say whatever you want. So let's pick on this one. So if you want like a good like level 4 response, quoting the percent is a good thing. So you could say 44.4% of students spent 21 to 30 minutes on homework per night. Perfect. If you wanted to elaborate that, you could say this was the most. It's really up to you. If you wanted to pick the frequency that had 8, you could say the same thing and say this was the second most in the class. It's really up to you. So that's it for our guided practice test review together for your stats test. At this time, if you haven't already, you should go over the review in your workbook. I think it's 4.7. And as I mentioned in the introductory 2-part videos, you should be doing this test during the time frame that I have. So I'm going to open it up at 9:45. You should be doing it between 9:45 and 11:55. That way you don't get behind everybody else and you don't miss future lessons, at least according to everybody else. And then it just means that you have less time, that you have to work on stuff at nighttime outside of the school day. So remember, once you hit start quiz, you get 2 hours and 10 minutes. You can start anytime. You'll get 2 hours from that time. The closer you start to 9:45, the better, though. And if you can't meet that requirement, you have to let me know as soon as possible. If you have any tech issues, you have to let me know as soon as possible. I will also be in an open Teams meeting. Remember, you can click on it in the activity feed. And if you have questions about your test, questions about the test questions themselves, you need clarification, you can just drop into that Teams meeting and I'll admit you from the lobby and you can ask your question. I'll get back to you. Remember, it's also important that you know for your tests, you are doing them on paper. So yes, they're all multiple choice. That's just there for your benefit. But you are treating this like a test. So you're looking at those questions on the quiz. You're answering them in order, using a ruler for graphs, coloring for graphs, showing all your work like it was a test. And then you are submitting your quiz and you're going to take a picture of all of your questions, all the work you did for your questions. Again, I would much prefer it to be all one document. So either you know how to do that with your phone or you're going to save it all as a PDF and upload, hopefully, one. Now, if you can't figure it out, obviously, you can submit multiple files as multiple pictures. But I would really like it. It'd make it much easier for me to mark if you can submit it as one file. And remember, you submit it. So you go to assessments, assignments, and then stats test. And you're going to submit your test solutions within 20 minutes of you hitting submit quiz. Remember to do your own work. Don't copy off anybody. There's lots of tools that I have on D2L that help me to decide if, something seems off and there seems to be two identical test solutions coming my way. And remember, everyone's working on a different version of the test, so you really don't have any reason to cheat with anybody else. But again, you guys are all smart kids. You've been doing your work, I'm sure, and you're all going to be very, very successful. But again, remember, communication is key. You need to talk to me. You need to ask questions if you're having any difficulties with doing the test and the timeline given, or with questions themselves. And one thing to note here as well, now that I think about it, part of your test obviously is going to be just definitions. You do not have to show any work for those questions. You can just straight up answer the multiple choice question and that's it. That's it. Good luck later today on your test. I'll be online in real time on Teams should you need help. And then after lunch, I think we're going to get started on unit number 5.